There's a crisis in this country when it comes to young women, adolescent women, pre-adolescent women. Not only have we focused quite a bit on the transgender issue, and if you believe the numbers, a remarkable percentage of young women who don't want to identify as girls anymore. They're having top surgeries, they're changing their appearance so that they can act like boys. But we also now have a new study coming out of the CDC that says there's a rapid, like precipitous increase in the number of teen suicides among young girls. What's going on with the women in this country? Well, let's bring in a young woman, Amber Athey, one of our favorites over at Spectator. And Amber, listen, as nice as it is to have you on to not talk about Dylan Mulvaney, as you often do with us, this is a critically important issue, and it was just, I'm the father of two young women, and this terrifies me.
It should. I mean, it should terrify any parent or any future parent, and unfortunately, I think what we're seeing here is the result of decades of propaganda that tells women that they need to reject every aspect of their femininity. Our society repeatedly teaches women that in order to be successful, they have to act more like men. And it's no surprise, really, I think, that you do see women grappling on more aggressively to the transgender craze more than men are. And it's because they feel uncomfortable in their bodies. And then instead of being told that it's normal and you're going to grow out of it, the left-wing trans lobby tells them, we've got an easy solution for you. You can just be a man instead.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pressure coming from our societal forces, from Hollywood to our politics to our academics, who are just simply telling young women that they are not enough as they are.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. I saw a statistic the other day that the vast majority of young girls who are going through a transgender process, they do the puberty blockers. If they end up having surgery, overwhelming number just have the top surgery, which tells me they don't actually want to be a man or live life as a man. They want to appear as a man, or more ideally, just not appear as a young woman. And in a weird way, and I know I'm getting esoteric here, but even that is kind of a suicide. You know, you're killing who you were born to be. You're killing who you were supposed to be. So, I mean, this truly is a mental health crisis. Why isn't it discussed in that frame?
There's almost this shame attached to being a woman who embraces your femininity at this point. I mean, look at the societal depictions of women who dress in all pink or put on a lot of makeup. They're routinely mocked and told that they're doing something wrong. And I don't think that this is being looked at as a mental health crisis, because there's not an easy solution to mental health problems.
Yeah.
And offering up the option of surgery makes it seem like there's sort of this easy out. And there's also been recent studies, one of which was covered pretty extensively in the New York Times, about the fact that young women are also being prescribed antidepressants at higher rates than ever, and how when those get prescribed at younger ages, they do tend to alter brain chemistry permanently. And unless you're on, obviously, the right cocktail of medication, so to speak, this can have damaging effects throughout your entire life. We see, scores of young women who have flat affectations, who seem generally bored all the time, and have lost that spark that comes with living due to the SSRIs. And so that's another element of this, where we just over-medicalize and over-prescribe people having normal feelings of uncomfortableness, of not fitting in. And that has to be okay. We have to teach people to find meaning in being uncomfortable.
Right. Which, by the way, everybody has to deal with in adolescence. It was uncomfortable for me too. It's uncomfortable for everybody. I think you're onto something here in terms of the societal and cultural judgment against girls being girls and being feminine. However, I do want to sort of drill down on one aspect of it. Say you are a girl who enjoys your femininity and you want to embrace your femininity and do all these girl things. I just heard Trent Horn say this on his podcast, actually, so I don't want to steal it from him. Back in our day, you know, in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, you know, the unattainable beauty goal was some supermodel or actress that you might see in a magazine or maybe on television or in a movie. Now with social media, that unattainable beauty goal that a 14-year-old girl might be looking at on Instagram could be the girl sitting in the seat next to her. with the filters and all the things that they can do, I mean, this unattainable object of beauty and femininity is a peer in your own school. That's got to really sort of put even more psychological pressure on girls to be something that they're not.
There's no question that social media is a huge driver of that discomfort that young women feel and feeling like they're not good enough. They are constantly bombarded with images of people who seemingly have better bodies, a better life, more money, and it's all a facade because, as we know, people who have to shout across the rooftops about how great their life is typically are maybe missing a little something inside. And also, a lot of these women have plastic surgery, they're using filters, they're using Photoshop.
Yeah.
And so these aren't even real images that these girls are looking at, but it still affects the psyche just the same.
Yeah, and by the way, back in the 80s, 90s, and early thousands, those weren't real images either. If you saw these actresses and models away from what People magazine made them look like, you would see that. Amber, there's one other thing that struck me. I saw that this study came out, and as I mentioned, it came from the CDC. Well, ironically, I've got to think that a lot of depression that adolescent girls, teenage girls are feeling right now, isolation, hopelessness, inability to interact socially in a healthy way, that's the fault of the CDC. Because during COVID, the CDC forced them to be isolated and withdrawn.
Exactly. And where did they turn to for socialization? Social media, the exact driver we were just talking about of a lot of this emotional instability among young women because they weren't allowed to interact in person. And when you're on social media, you're chasing the next like, you're trying to match that person next to you who seemingly has the better face. So you maybe even start photoshopping yourself or using the filters yourself, and pretty soon you don't even know who you are anymore. Yeah. It's a really powerful drug, and even for someone like me, you know, I'm almost 30 at this point, and have been on social media for work for a number of years, and I just notice how much happier and more at peace I am when I'm not constantly on my phone all day.
So I guess that's where I'm headed with this. What is the solution here? What should parents do? What should professionals be doing? Because clearly whatever they've been trying to do hasn't been working. What do you think young women really need right now from the adults who should be in charge?
They need the hardest thing, which is tough love. They need leaders and adults, whether it's teachers or parents, who are willing to tell them the hard truths and willing to be a parent as opposed to a friend. It seems like the millennial generation of parents and maybe some of the young Gen Xers tried to reverse the really tough parenting that maybe they experienced from the baby boomers or the greatest generation. And they went so far in the other direction that they became permissive parents, which meant the kids could get away with anything. They were just there to make sure that the kids were happy, and happy meant doing whatever they wanted to do. Well, the result of that is obviously children's brains aren't fully developed and they make a lot of bad decisions.
Right.
And sometimes they just need to be told no.
You're so right. And this ultimate, you know, I remember my peers, I'm a Gen X parent, right? And I remember, I don't care what my child ends up being, I just want them to be happy. When happy is the ultimate goal and that's all you focus on, ironically, 57% of teen girls now feel persistently sad or hopeless. So whatever it is they're doing to try to be happy is actually having the opposite effect. So I guess the object of your happiness is more important than the actual result.
Well, their view of happiness is not long-lasting happiness. It's not eternal happiness. It's actually instant gratification. And when that instant gratification goes away, when the dopamine receptors stop firing in your brain, all of a sudden you're left feeling even emptier than before because happiness really comes from chasing a larger purpose.
Great point. So in other words, you know, everybody knows ice cream tastes good, but in the long run, it's not good for you. Meanwhile, if you can find a salad you really like, that tastes great. And it's also going to be good for you. And we just got to figure out how to get our kids to eat their vegetables. That makes sense?
Love that.
Something like that. All right. Meanwhile, I know you're disappointed, but what did you think of Kamala Harris's outfit for the State of the Union? Well, we'll get to that another time. Amber Athey, always good to talk with you. Thanks for joining us. There's more to come on O'Connor tonight. You're watching Salem News Channel while we're still around.